Thank you, Professor Bellas, for your kind introduction, and thank you to Nestlé Health Science for inviting me to sharing with you my presentation about discussing the scientific evidence supporting the EAT-10 validity and its use in routine clinical practice. These are my disclosures. And I want to ask you something. Do these words sound familiar to you? And I'm going to read some of them. For example, I cough 3-4 times per day, usually after drinking, but this is normal. I'm just 78 years old. And what about this one? I'm still the last one to finish lunch. I have to swallow several times before emptying my mouth, which is really tiring. But I think this is normal. I'm old. This is very common because prevalence of dysphagia among adults over 60 years of age living independently is between 11 to 33% of the population. But despite of the high prevalence of oropharyngeal dysphagia, it is frequently underdiagnosed. Nobody knows that it's there. Because recognition of this entity by the medical and political communities is strikingly poor. And health services rarely screen older patients for dysphagia and do not train their staff to diagnose it. It's not important. Symptoms of dysphagia, as we just seen, may not be recognized as a problem by older subjects themselves or their caregivers. They think it's normal. It's a trivial finding. And many patients, unfortunately, are diagnosed when safety impairment of swallow leads to respiratory infections and pneumonias requiring hospitalization. And then we see there is a problem. For each undetected hospitalized patient with dysphagia, we can see an impact on healthcare costs and length of stay. In fact, the presence of dysphagia increased, according to this systematic review, 40% of healthcare costs and 8 days of length of stay per patient, which is very, very expensive for the health service. And despite knowing all of this, the most severe complications of dysphagia are not always detected, and they are not only a matter of clinical outcomes. There is a problem with emotional distress. The patient feels isolated, feels depression, anxiety, reduce his quality of life. And all of these patients, these older adults, mainly frail or institutionalized or hospitalized older adults, or patients with neurological disease, COPD, or with other diseases like head and neck pathology, are really at high risk of oropharyngeal dysphagia without being diagnosed. Because this recognition, the recognition of this entity, is really strikingly poor by all the people involved in that. The time is now for screening in dysphagia, and our role is very important. We have this scope and review by Bernardes et al. That evaluated the screening tools designed to assess and evaluate oropharyngeal dysphagia. And all of these are here described, but the most referred tool in the literature in a variety of settings across different phenotypes of patients with OD is the EAT-10 test, which has been applied in general population, in elderly with pneumonia, in the community, and in other settings, like in particular diseases. And what's the eating assessment tool? I don't need to explain what it is. All of you know it. It's a 10-item self-administered questionnaire to evaluate dysphagia symptoms in persons with different causes and in different clinical settings. It can be completed by the patient, or it could be helped by the relatives or caregivers giving some guidance to it. Of course, as every single test, it has some limitations. We cannot use it if we have a patient with cognitive impairment, if the patient has a psychiatric disease, or if has difficulties with handwriting or reading, of course. But in the general population, in the community, is the first step to reach the endpoint, which is the diagnosis of established oropharyngeal dysphagia. It's a test that has been designed and validated by a multidisciplinary team with people involved in the treatment of this symptom, and it's very easy to be interpreted. The EAT-10 score greater than or equal 3 implies the presence of swallowing difficulties. As you know, here we have the 10 questions about losing weight, about extra effort with swallowing liquids or solids or pills, or the questions are displayed here. And what does the clinical practice guideline say about it? And here we have the consensus for voice quality assessment in clinical practice of the European Laryngological Society and Union of the European Phoniatricians, and they recommend the use of the EAT-10 as one of the valid screening tools for oropharyngeal dysphagia, and they have been recently published, as you all know. And I want to show you one paper that has been done by our group in Santiago de Compostela using this screening test. We made a prospective study in which a VBST was carried out in the first 72 hours following admission for a stroke, either ischemic or hemorrhagic stroke. The screening of dysphagia prior to this event was carried out using the EAT-10 to see if this patient has a dysphagia before being hospitalized by the acute event. Those with the positive EAT-10 greater or equal 3 were discarded, and out of 106 patients, we see with the VBST that 56.6% of patients after the stroke suffered from dysphagia. And we see that the patients that had a frontal lesion had respiratory infection or developed respiratory infection in 27% of patients, of cases, after the stroke in the following 3 months. What about the validity and reliability of the test? It has been demonstrated in large general cohort of patients in a wide range of causes of dysphagia and in relation to the gold standards and other clinically validated instruments. The psychometric properties, mainly using the classical theory, have been tested with good overall results. It has excellent internal consistency, and the intraclass correlation coefficients, as we have in this meta-analysis recently published this year, ranged from 0.7 to 1. So this screening tool is very accurate in terms of this reliability and validity. What about the ability to predict aspiration? And this study has been made in stable COPD patients. And it could be seen that the EAT-10 predicted aspiration with a very good level of accuracy. And in fact, when using a cutoff greater than 9, a sensitivity of 91% was found and specificity of 77% was found. Here we have this figure showing this statistically significant difference between PAS below 6 or over 6, which differentiates the patients with aspiration or not. In another disease, not in COPD patients, but in neurological disease, in particular in ALS patients. This test demonstrated also good discriminant ability to accurately identify the penetrators or aspirators, and they suggest a cutoff score of 8 to get a sensitivity of 87% and specificity of 72%. But we are speaking about different cutoffs. What's the cutoff we should use with the EAT-10? In general, we can say that cutoff values greater than 2 and 3, greater than or equal, have good diagnostic performance, but in general, a cutoff of 3 is recommended due to a better diagnostic accuracy. So we can take this 3 number. Another advantage of this test is that it has been translated into several languages. We have all them here, and cross-cultural adaptations have been made. We have some here: Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, German, Chinese, Japanese, Turkish, Arabic, Dutch, Hebrew, Swedish, and Turkish. These are the languages where we can find a validated EAT-10 test. In conclusion, what are the take-home messages I want you to take after this meeting? That oropharyngeal dysphagia is underdiagnosed, and we have the necessity of select patients in the community, in the general population, at risk of dysphagia. We have several screens, several tools, several instruments, but the EAT-10 test can be used in this first step as a primary screening tool because of its reliability and validity, its good internal consistency, inter-class correlation coefficient, and psychometric properties, its usefulness through different phenotypes of patients in different settings. It has some advantages: low cost, easy of use and interpreted. Patients who fail this test should be referred to a more thorough evaluation. As I said, is this very first step. And I think that the EAT-10 stands as an important tool for early detection to improve public health care and quality of life of patients with dysphagia. The time is now. Let's include it in our clinical protocols, everywhere, not just in the last steps, in the very few moments. Let's encourage our colleagues to do it, because promoting dysphagia screening and its early detection will have patients before it will be too late and we find them with an aspiration pneumonia in our hospitals. And thank you very much for your attention.